Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Coach's Corner. Unfortunately, we don't have Bam, but we do have a guest, Zeke, join with us today, and we're going to be talking about how to improve in Smash, or I guess in anything, just the steps of improvement, and also kind of gauging what level you're at and what, I guess, tactics to use to improve depending on what level of play you're at. So I think this is a great topic for all of us here at Coach's Corner because we've all coached, at least at the bare minimum Smash. I know other people in here have coached other games as well. So yeah, I'm really excited to get into this. Zeke, how are you doing, man?
Good. Very excited to be on here. Been a long time coming, and I think this is definitely a perfect topic for all of us to sit down and just really dig into. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think where we want to start off is the lower level of play. Obviously, the biggest part of the audience is going to be lower levels. And even when you break down a tournament, right, 50% of any tournament, well, they're going O2, right? There's going to be, or 50% of the tournament are O2ers. So that happens. It's just the way of the beast, right? And I know Tony brings this up a lot because he does a lot of like TOing stuff as well. Even for tournament organizers, you want to cater your tournament to the tournament experience to those people that go O2 because that's the majority of your audience. So we can definitely start off there and then eventually get into top level. I think top level obviously is the most fun part because that's where you get into a lot of like theory crafting and you really get down to the nitty gritty in terms of like frame data and in terms of like what you should be using in neutral and all that other stuff. But first, we got to get to the fundamental parts of improvement. And yeah, you want to start things off, Ramses?
Sure. So I coach across a lot of like spectrums. I've taught my girlfriend how to play Smash basically from zero. I work with a lot of different levels, and something that always comes up is basically there's a standard process for improvement at all levels, and to me it goes basically first you gotta learn tools, then you gotta integrate tools, and then you gotta polish tools, right? So generally, most of the time when I'm working with someone, the first thing I'm looking for is like, are there tools that they are not using that they should be using? And so to learn what tools you don't know, which is the hard part, right? I think that is like where like VOD review comes in really important, or getting a coach, or talking to people about the game, talking to other people who made the same character or like similar characters, and you basically want to get an idea of like what are some tools in your belt that you could be using that you're not using yet. And so there are people who approach it from a different perspective. I think it's good to start off with a bit of like breadth in your improvements, because every tool is contextualized by the existence of the other tools in your arsenal, right? So adding a new tool also recontextualizes your other available options. So the sooner you have like a wider range of options, the faster you can get towards like a higher level that is scalable. So if you start off with like a small range of options, small array of options, you might get to a higher level more quickly, but you're going to hit a wall more quickly as well. So I think for the most scalable improvement, breadth is like an important place to start. And then from there, once you know about your tools or like a new tool, that's where you start the grind, right? You start just putting the hours in, you try to implement your tool. And then while implementing it, while trying to get it to be more of an intuitive part of your decision making, that's where you start polishing and you can start understanding some of the nuances, and like how some of the other things that you've learned play into it as well. And that to me is kind of like the basic cycle of improvement. So what I often tell people is it's a cycle of like theory application, right? So there's theory so that you get more understanding, and then you try to apply your new understanding, which gives you more theory, which allows you to then like get basically have new things to try to apply, and it's kind of like ping pongs back and forth. So what I recommend if you're a newer player is to spend a lot of time absorbing the game. So watch a lot of tournaments. You don't necessarily need to watch the top 8, right? Like that's not necessary, but like watch some of the pools matches, watch some of the top 64. Even if you cannot apply it, knowing that like some of these concepts are like they apply and that they are important in the long term, it again, it contextualizes what you're doing right now. So I think that for most low level players, I think that is a good start, is to just like have some sort of idea behind what you're trying to apply, and then try to like consciously iterate on that like ping pong between like theory, practice, theory, practice, theory, practice. What do you think, Zeke?
I think you're definitely right on like the practice theory concept. The way I tend to go about it, especially with like newer players, and I've had like a range of, especially like age ranges of newer players. I've had like 16-year-old, hey, my older brother or my buddies play, I want to beat them, to like 30, 40-year-old dad who's like, hey, I want to beat my coworkers and it's fun. And like it's so cool to see like the different ways that I've gotten to go about it. But the thing that I've seen that works really well is, especially in like modern games. So this is, I'll use like Smash as an example, but I've even had this happen in like Overwatch and Valorant and stuff like that, where the best way to find the concepts that they don't really understand or even are aware of is especially exposing them to characters or maps or things like that that they're not comfortable on. Um, the amount of times that I've seen a player be like, "Oh, that's a thing you can do in this game," when they fight like Pac-Man, because it's just such a unique character that they don't even like get to think about the way like how to interact with the items, compared to when you're fighting like Mario, right? And obviously we can look at that and immediately think about that, but for them it's like totally different world. And that has helped tremendously, is like continuing to expose them to the game, progressively like widening the perspective of like what is capable. And then it's continuing to like get that experience. I think one of the biggest things that people are really bad about when improving at games is it's not just like talking, but like productive discussion, in a sense of trying to explore an idea, even if they're wrong, but like explicitly talking about it with someone or multiple people. And that's why coaching is so helpful, especially in those early phases where they know they can observe something, but they don't understand what it means, right? And either surrounding themselves with people who can answer those questions or guide them to the answers is like really imperative. Where I feel like what a lot of people end up defaulting to is they are faced with something new, and it's like the default of like, oh, that's really stupid, and not trying to like understand or problem solve or anything, and just being like, no, that's dumb. I don't like that, and that's where people get stuck. Um, and that's where having like the right people around you, whether it be coaches, friends, supporting players, etc., that can guide you in that direction, is I think really pivotal. But I think you definitely like nailed it on the head, where it's exposing yourself to something new and then trying to apply it, and then through that process being like, oh, that's something else new, and whether it being like this is the next step. Or one of the things I tend to do with a lot of players, even just this past weekend, I had a bunch of students go to Combo Breaker, and I was like, hey, go there, play as much as you can, write down everything you learn, and most of it's not going to make any sense or even be applicable right now. But this gives us like a 6-month runway now, because you just played probably the most Smash you've played in months in like one weekend. And there's no way we can take all of that and compress it right now. But what we do have is a lot. It's like an adrenaline shot of experience, basically. And I think that's something that's really valuable, whether it be locals or majors or anything like that, is the cycle of exposing yourself to something new, going out and trying, failing, and then coming back. And like the part that people skip is like reflecting and like trying to genuinely understand, converse, and or even admit like I don't understand it. That's the part that people skip, is when they are faced with something and like I said, they just default to being like, that's dumb, I don't like that, instead of being like, I don't get it. And because they don't want to admit that they don't get it. Is that's the ego, I guess you could say, and the pride and stuff like that. But I think that's definitely the play, is that cycle of exposure, trial, and then reflection, repeat. And like that's the, I guess, the secret sauce, I guess you could say.
That's a scientific method. Like, it's just straight
Yeah.
up. When you write a paper, you start a hypotheses, you test it out, you get feedback, and then you adjust your hypotheses, and you repeat it until you get to the solution, right? Yeah.
Yep.
It applies. It really does.
How about you, Tony? What's your experience with the lower level of just coaching? When for I guess I won't say lower level, like entry level. Entry level. That's a nicer word.
Mm-hmm.
So I've taught a few O2 level players to reach PGR or to beat like top 10 players on the PGR. I'd say my range overall is less than everyone else here, but generally my approach, and I do agree with everything else everyone else has said so far, but the idea is I generally try to kind of jumpstart them by identifying what is in their repertoire for preferences. So what characters they like, what they think is good about the game, ask them about all that. And then I'll just use that to kind of narrow down and pick what I think is the strongest thing that they can do within those criteria and just recommend that to them. And then I just teach them that one tool and suggest that they just play the game with that one tool. And It's a little bit in the opposite direction of breadth, because the idea is you simplify the game first, but the idea is to essentially tell someone to enter an RPS tournament with paper, because most people pick rock. So the best thing you can start with is paper, and just pick paper and keep picking paper. And when somebody picks scissors, pick paper again. And sometimes they'll overthink it and start picking rock to try and outthink themselves. And then we'll just talk about what worked, what didn't work. And then we iterate, just like what was said before. And then we find out support. But the idea is generally when you are starting out with the game, try and identify the strongest thing you can be doing and just play that. And until you can actually consistently execute the strongest thing you can do, I think that at the lowest level of play that you don't usually need a B plan, just because people are going to know how to counter what you're doing, and then they'll just fail to do it, because at that level of play, what is supposed to be near 100% at higher levels of play of things that you watch on tournament aren't going to happen. And then on top of that, a lot of things like frustration, execution, like if someone says, oh, well, I knew you were going to do X or Y, and you just did it again, you're so silly. That shouldn't have worked on me. And then they get hit by it again, and then they get more tilted, and just that those kinds of processes tend to work a lot more. And then it doesn't work once you reach a certain level of play, or you'll run into someone who just knows the counter and can execute the counter, at which point then you're going to lose to it, and that's okay. And so I think the most important thing to teach people is that your goal in entering an event is to lose. And so whenever you enter a tournament, your goal is to lose and then to learn at least 3 things from that loss. And if you don't, then your consolation prize is the money, so that you can then fund your travel to go find an event that you'll lose at. And then you find those losses, and then you learn from those losses instead. And so the idea is that the ultimate goal is to find losses to iterate on. And it's not that you can't learn from winning, it's just easier to learn from losses. And so when you're first starting out, there's essentially going to be things that are easier to learn than other things. And so we're going to start with the things that have the highest rate of return and also are easy to learn. And then we're just going to stick to that and just kind of grind that out and get as many low-hanging fruit of knowledge that we can find. And that's usually what I have found to be the best way to grow, is just do that. Another aspect is if you are teaching this to truly entry-level players, there are certain concepts that a lot of Smash players take for granted that not everybody understands. So for example, a rule of thumb is that the closer to the center of the stage or the center of the screen you are, the better you are off. And that's not always true, and there's plenty of exceptions to that, and there's a lot of nuance that goes into that. But if you are first starting out, that's really all you need to know. And sometimes it's more important that you go toward the center of the screen than to try and attack your opponent if your opponent is closer to the center of the screen than you are. This is ultimately a king of the hill game. And again, even though that's not always true and there's a lot of nuance to it, entry-level players, that's going to serve them a lot to understand that anytime your opponent is in a position where they're not at the center of the screen, just the risk reward of situations, of trades, of things like that, that usually goes in your favor. So I'd say that that's the most important thing to teach to entry-level players.
Yeah, and then I'll finish things off for entry level players. I think for most of my experience with entry level players, I think most of my experience is more on the top to like mid level. I used to do like open commission coaching in Smash 4, and then in Ultimate, I did more like high to top level coaching. So most of my entry to mid level coaching experience is from Smash 4, but I did still have some in Ultimate, especially like right when Metafy opened up. I opened up to like commission coaching, so I had a little bit there, but mainly spent most of my time specifically coaching Void and Tweak for most of my coaching career within Ultimate. So with entry level coaching, the usual thing I get is they want to know what character they want to commit to. So they'll usually come in and they'll be like, oh, I play like these like 3 to 5 characters. Like they usually have a very wide range because they're still trying to figure out Smash in general, and they're trying to figure out what character they want to play. So then I have to explain different attributes of the game. I have to explain fall speed. I have to explain air acceleration. I have to explain like, do you like being in the air? Do you like being grounded? Movement speed on the ground. I have to explain burst options, right? And then I also have to explain technical characters where it's like, okay, so if you do like Sheik, I have to give you a warning that, you know, it's going to take a little bit more time and you're going to like mess up and get frustrated and lose matches because you cannot execute, or not cannot, but like you mis-executed in a certain situation and yada, yada, yada. Do you want to play like a sword character? Do you want to be in the air a lot and have like timing mix-ups of like when you're going to swing because you're in the air so long, because you're so floaty, but then you're going to get juggled really fast? Do you want like a like a really quick character, fast on the ground, whiff punish, movement based, right? So I kind of have to break down the archetypes and pinpoint what type of direction they want to go, even if it's pinpointing like down to a group of characters. Because obviously, if you start playing and you're like, oh yeah, I play 6 characters, like no, sorry, it's not going to work like that. Especially if they're planning on competing, right? It depends. And then obviously, like this is across the board for all coaches, like identifying the goals of the person getting coached, kind of breaking down their time, also helping them with time management, being like, okay, so you want to play Sheik, but you only can play 30 minutes a day, 3 times a week. Well, I'm sorry to break it to you, but like Sheik might not be the character for you, right? Might have to go with Game and Watch or something like that. But, well,
Yo,
well, I'm just saying, like, right? Like,
you're
Game
a
Watch,
Fox player. You have to do Game Watch dirty.
Game Watch is a character that you can put little time into, but get a lot
Yes.
more.
Yeah,
A lot more effectiveness from the character for the amount of time you put into it, right?
Punish game character, right?
Right, exactly. So it just kind of breaking down all those baselines, and then when we get into like actual gameplay improvement, I'm definitely along like Tony's mentality where I'm trying to simplify the game as much as possible and have like some kind of foundation of the game. So if they're playing Cloud, I'm gonna be like, okay, well, you're gonna have to learn how to back air, but like it's gonna be like a bunch of different types of back air. So just really try to use this move as much as possible. And then when you're in the ground or something, you can go into shield and up be out of shield. And I try to give them like one air option, one ground option. And then from there, it's like, okay, you're gonna learn how to use these options, and these are gonna be most of the options you use most of the time. And then you're gonna find these scenarios where it's like, fuck, these moves didn't work in these scenarios. What happens when they start pairing the back air? What happens when they start like spacing, like they cross me up and they space outside of the B reverse up B out of shield? Like you're gonna start getting these more specific scenarios where then you'll find the answers to use these other tools, right? But you need to give them some kind of pathway. So it's like, okay, most of these scenarios, these tactics are working, but as I get to play people that maybe like go to tournaments, right? Even if they're O2 tours, like they know how to play the game, right? And then they starting to punish me for other things like this. But if I'm on Elite Smash, I'm just playing with my friends, this back air / like up be out of shield strategy, I'm fucking everybody up. Like this is great, right? So I want to put them onto the path where like they have the most success the quickest, but also because of that, they're gonna hit these road bumps or like these struggles, right, where they need to start branching out their tools and stuff like that. And I know Cloud is one of the easiest characters I can use in that example, but even for Fox, like Fox, I would Nair and dash attack, right? Those are going to be your 2 main options that you use, one in the air, one in the ground, and then from there you're gonna, you know, after if they go to their first tournament, the first thing they're going to say is like, man, people just started shielding. Now what the fuck do I do, right? And then you have to explain, okay, well now you have to grab them, try to put them on platforms or put them on the ledge, and then you go branch out into advantage state, and all the other pieces will start falling into place. But I always like to try to start with like, oh, here's your broken air option in neutral, here's your broken ground option in neutral, and then everything can fall into place after that. So now we can move on to mid-level players, and I like to categorize mid-level players are players that are entering tournaments. Even if they go O2, I would still consider them like it's between like entry to mid. But if you go out to tournaments, you've already made that very big leap of going to an offline environment where if you go to your first tournament, you're probably going to be one of the few people, especially nowadays, that's the first tournament you're at, right? And everyone else has probably like been there multiple times, already have the experience. Even if they go O2, like they're going to be a stronger O2er than you, yada, 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 right? And then obviously you go up the scale. So I would say like mid-level players are players that are about like O2 to 2-2, and a high-level player I consider a player that can be a threat. Like a high-level player is usually on the PR and they can threaten world-class players. So like a world-class player could lose a set on a bad day to a high-level player. So that's what I consider high-level. So mid-level is a very long path. Like it's going to take you a while to jump from mid to high. So this is where I get most of my experience. So like I said, I I didn't get too much entry level. I got here and there. And even for entry level, I always suggested, even like when I was before when I was coaching on MidLevel, I was charging like 100 an hour because I was coaching like really top level players, right? So I would even suggest them like, hey, I don't necessarily think you're ready for my level of coaching. Like there's a bunch of other coaches that are cheaper that could you essentially get you the same effectiveness, or you can go on YouTube. I always highly recommend people that are entry level. Go on YouTube. There's so much information out there on YouTube, right? I mean, even on this channel, Smash University, you can learn a lot here. And then there's a bunch of other channels. I mean, I think practically everyone here has done content, right? I know Ramses has been on the content grind as well. So everyone here has done content for Smash, and there's other coaches, players, analysts of the game that do content out there that you can get that perspective on YouTube for free and build some kind of base understanding of the game, right? And then branch out from there, start having conversations at your locals and stuff like that to build on that. And then I feel like once you get to that mid-level, that's a good time to start getting coaching, right? And even then, I've had mid-level players get coaching from me, and then like 2 days later, ask for another lesson. I'm like, okay, I really appreciate the support, right? But you need time to like let it marinate, at least bare minimum a week. And it depends on like how much you're grinding and stuff, but bare minimum a week. But I highly recommended like bi-weekly or monthly lessons, right? Because like Zeke said, when you go to a tournament, you get that list. That's the roadmap for like 6 months. It's not a roadmap for 2 weeks, right? So
6 hours, yeah.
right. So
If only.
yeah, if only. So you gotta take it in steps. And I think the big one for me when I watch mid-level players, and I call this the rate of commitment, I think was the name of what I called it. But essentially, like I'll be watching their gameplay and I'm like, you committed? In the next 3 seconds, like after I watch like a minute, I'll pause it and I'll be like, you committed here, and you're gonna commit again in the next 3 seconds. I start reading them. Like I'm just like, you're gonna commit in the next 3 seconds again with something that's like really punishable. Click play, within the next 3 seconds, another dash attack or another dash grab, right? So I think the rate of commitment is something that not a lot of mid players realize they're doing, but you want that to be as low as possible. The only issue is it takes experience and it takes mental energy. So when you run out of mental energy or mental stamina, it is easy to just dash attack someone in the corner because that takes no reaction. I don't have to react to that. You are throwing out an option, and like there's sometimes where like it's like, oh, I'm gonna dash back, and then people in their brain is like, after this dash back, I'm dash attacking in. And you're at that point, you're not even caring what the opponent is doing. You're not reacting. So that takes almost zero mental energy to do. You just need to execute that on that. And thanks to Ultimate, there's a lot of the movement options and stuff like that are not barriered by tech. So it's not like it's not like in Smash 4, it's like, okay, I'm gonna perfect pivot back and then I'm gonna dash attack in because yada yada yada, right? Because that has some kind of execution barrier, or like wave land here, wave dash back here, and then do this. In Ultimate, there's just no tech barrier to movement. So this is literally taking almost zero mental stamina or energy to do. And sometimes people will just run out, right? Sometimes that's something you have to build, whether it's playing friendlies or playing through tournaments. But I think that's the biggest one at mid-level, where almost every single mid-level player I've coached, I have to go over that and just be like, oh, hey, so here you like dash back, then you dash tacked in. It would have been nice if you dash back and you like reassess the situation. And I've talked about my concept of like refresh rate on like Tweak Talks, and I don't know if I've done a video on Smash University, but essentially refresh rate is your ability to go like dash back, and then you have to refresh in your brain and be like, okay, I dashed back, but what did my opponent do? And you're tracking what you do with your opponent and then making the decision after you dash back. So if you have low refresh rate, you're gonna dash back and you're gonna clump these decisions together. You're gonna do like 3 decisions, and then you're gonna refresh what the situation is. All right, I'm gonna jump back, dash back, and then dash back in. Those are 3 decisions you made, but you didn't track where your opponent was. So your refresh rate is about 3 interactions, right? But at top level players, like tippy top, their refresh rate is like half of an interaction, or like within the interactions, they're refreshing the situation and making decisions. And most of the time it's like subconscious because that's how much times they went through it and stuff like that. So trying to get mid-level players to understand refresh rate and the concept of reacting after a scenario, even if you play slower, you need to go through that, and then it eventually becomes faster and faster and faster. So what are your experience, Ramses, with coaching mid-level players? Because I'm pretty sure this is going to be the most common in terms for all of us.
For sure. I think it's funny talking about beginning players that you and Tony prefer styles where you and this is like an observation. You assume that when they hit a bump, you guys can help them through the bump, right? Because you guys are used to working with like single players and being like pretty on top of the progress. Whereas like for me, and I don't know about Zeke, but like I teach breadth because I'm gonna give you as many tools as I can within like this 1 hour we have, and then like you can make the progress yourself. You know what I mean? So I think that's interesting, and I think that just kind of goes back to like coaching styles, and you got to find like a style that works for you. Because I think like the process that Tony mentions, I think in terms of and you Charles, I think in terms of like effectiveness, it is probably the most effective way to help someone get to a high level because you're giving them the satisfaction of short-term progress, and then like when they hit a road bump, you just help them through it, right? It's a very organic process. Whereas what I'm doing, I'm just like giving them as many tools as possible, and I'm like, okay, well now you have like a lot of tools, now you can figure out how they like fit together. That's more like a long-term process, right? Like I'm here like 1 hour. That's all I have with you. Like in that 1 hour, I will get you as ready as possible for like the next like year. That's my perspective. So coming from that perspective as well, I think there are two types of mid-level players that I've noticed in my coaching. So there are the ones that oh god, you guys are ready for this one. You have the problems and the problem solvers.
I'm leaving. I'm leaving. No, the
Not
podcast are done.
No, but
no.
for real, you find people with previous competitive experiences
Yeah.
that understand that like you are looking for like a low risk play style, that you're looking to counter the opponent, that you're looking to integrate as much information as possible, but they're just not at a level of development in the game yet to be able to do that. And most of the time there's some fundamental misunderstanding that we can work on, and from there they usually just kind of like do the work and grow to like a higher level. I've had a couple of these, but I would say they're probably like 5 to 10% of mid-level players. The large majority of mid-level players are people who have learned their character well enough to basically have decent risk reward, and they just like repeatedly do this risk reward thing over and over again. And most of the time, to help those level of players out, I do what Tony did or what Tony talked about, and that's like teach them in the importance of stage control. But to talk about it on more of a conceptual level, what I'm trying to do is I'm looking at like the decisions they're making, and I'm looking at what they're factoring in their decisions. And I'm mostly like guessing when I review their VOD, and then I ask them some questions. I'm like, okay, well, in this situation, I noticed that you threw out like a forward smash. Why did you do that? And then usually they're like, well, actually, I don't know, haha. Or like they're like, well, it's if it hits, it would have killed. Right. And then based on those answers, I get an idea of, okay, so what do they value? What are some of the dynamics in their decision making? And then what I'm generally looking for is I'm looking for dynamics that they're not factoring at all or not factoring in enough. And usually, like Tony said, that's stage control. Stage control is like the most important one because people like, again, like if you look at modern fighting games, and this is like a very like smart development, there's less and less of a focus on like quote unquote fundamentals and more a focus on the uniqueness of characters. Why? Because it's hard to learn fundamentals because it's so like interwoven, and in a lot of ways, like if we want to talk about like tools on a tool belt and how they affect each other in terms of fundamental, that's the most like complex thing you can get. But what a character wants is often a lot more linear and a lot easier to understand because you're not factoring in the stage control, you're not factoring in what they are doing. It's just like at this percent, this is what my character is good at. In this position, this is what my character is good at. In neutral, these are the buttons that I use, right? So what you find is that a lot of people who reach that mid-level, they are at a point where they understand their own character very well. So what I'm mostly trying to do is, well, first of all, I'm trying to I'm trying to did he okay, there you go, he's back. He got auto booted to AFK. That's so funny. So first what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to kind of like polish up their understanding of their character, because I feel like, that's like low-hanging fruit, kind of like what Tony said. And if they have that understanding already, it's usually like little tweaks that just help them. Like, for example, oh, you're playing a lot of Joker, and you're relying a lot on like down throw back air. You can just do down throw nair, and if they air dodge, you can chase it down, get like more reward. Like small adjustments like that can already like do a lot. There's a lot of high level players, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, who are basically just like Super Saiyan mid-levels. You know what I mean? Like they're just like mid-level players with just like perfect risk reward, perfect execution, perfect spacing, but they still don't understand shit about the game, right? But like because they play their character so well, like they're Super Saiyan mid-levels, right? So first, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give them a little bit of that Super Saiyan serum, right? Just get them a little bit closer to that ideal. And then the most important part is I'm like, okay, but so now that we know what our character is good in, what if we introduce like this area, like stage control, or what if we introduce the idea of time advantages through undershooting, right? Stuff like that. And then like contextualize everything that we know in this new knowledge, and let's try to improve our gameplay by implementing just like this one new idea. And then usually what you see, especially if we're playing some games, but sometimes they come back after a while, is that their play changes tremendously, and you get like basically you add a whole new dimension, right? Because like now there is their normal risk reward, and then there's their risk reward in the context of stage control, and then stage control can have like the context of like cornering, center stage, contesting, and getting out of the corner. So that's already like 3 variations of what used to be one playstyle. And then once we're at a point where that's satisfactory, we can say, well, what if we introduce like I don't know, using feints. Now we have 3 variations of an original playstyle, and then there's also like 3 variations within every single variation where we either basically wait for a reversal, feint, or pressure directly. So now you're already at like 9 permutations. So as you can see, like as you add more and more like new concepts, you're exponentially increasing the variance in the playstyle. And so what usually happens is that when we introduce a new concept, there are like a few aspects of it that really stick and a few aspects that are a little bit more tedious. And that's what I zoom in on. So again, I try to add a little bit of Super Saiyan serum to the things that stick well, and I try to polish up the things that don't stick well. And just like that to me is kind of like the road from mid-level to like a proper high-level player. And I'm like, you know, Super Saiyan mid-levels are also proper high-level players, but like what I think is the most well-rounded. Again, like I'm assuming I have 1 hour, right? Like 1 hour, I'm going to give you as many tools as possible to succeed for the next like half year or something. So what I like to do is I'm just like, okay, I'm going to introduce the most important concepts first. And then a lot of that stuff, sometimes it's automatic, right? So sometimes some of the things that we talked about in the future comes out, like comes up on them automatically, right? Because like those are just things that you're naturally going to run into. Sometimes we have to talk about it, but usually it kind of snowballs, because once they start thinking about interactions in a certain way, right? Once I teach them how to think about it, then they can apply that themselves. So something that I often tell, like telling mid-level players, is like, if you ever have a problem, try to solve it in either space or time. So like you can probably either win through space, right? So you can like whiff punish something, outrange something, just be where the hitbox doesn't hit, right? Like a roll in, or you can punish it through time, interrupted, whiff punish it, you know, basically that. And through just like that way of thinking about the game, oftentimes a lot of people just kind of like take that and run with it, and then they come up with all of these solutions kind of by themselves, or they start watching VODs. Again, this advice of watching top level gameplay, it extends to mid level, right? They watch these VODs and they suddenly understand more about what's going on, and that at the end of the day, I think is the biggest difference between like mid level and high level is that like the journey from like low level to like mid level is often one about like, okay, what is my role in this game? What is my character doing? What are my tools? And then the rest of the journey, and that's why it's the hardest part, right? That's why mid level is the hardest part, is about the other. And like humans are complex. Like they're so like I could do like a 5-hour lesson just on like the psychology behind Smash, right? Let alone some of the more objective stuff like stage control, which is like, you know, like it's not really objective the same way like risk reward can be, right? Like a Roy Nair, you can pretty objectively say like that's a good tool, right? But stage control, like you can say like this is a good position and be like pretty correct, but it's a lot more abstract, right? And the abstract nature of the outside, right? Like everything that is outside of like your character and your control, that is what makes the rest of the journey hard. And I think most mid-level players should be focusing on those aspects.
What do you think, Zeke?
Right.
What are your experience mainly with the mid level?
The number one thing that I teach any sort of like mid-level player, should someone that goes to tournaments and like averages like 2-2 or 0-2, is can they look at the game while they are playing? Can they process what is happening in the moment? That is the number one thing that I teach them, because I think the hardest part for a lot of these players is the information processing, and like especially with Ultimate, how quick and chaotic everything can get. That the fact that you can go from neutral to scramble immediately is I think the number one thing that people like get scared of and like leads to where the bad habits, whether it be the roll, the random whiff, the mashing repeatedly, like you mentioned, and the refresh rate, like all that stuff. And the way that people will be able to overcome that is when they are self-aware. And that's something that I like with my own personal like program, I guess you could call it, and like how I go about it is like starting off like creating that foundation of like understanding like what our goals are, game plan, like basic understanding of the game. And then it's helping them reach a point where they can talk about the game with me. And if whether we're playing or watching, that while we're in that moment, they can go, "Oh, I shouldn't have done that." And realizing once they get to that step where they can realize like I'm making this mistake, then they can start to understand why am I making that mistake, and we can start to explore an interaction and the idea of like the first step is like with that entry level or like early on is like simplification, trying to simplify the game as much as possible, like you mentioned, which I think is perfect, where it's like give them like here are the 3 tools you use, we start there, we begin to innovate, we build off of that from there. And then it's the processing and understanding of like why did this not work, why did I do that. And from there, it's teaching them how to do that on their own too. Because very similar to Ramses, it's the kind of like getting a little bit of a shot in 1 hour of like how much can we get to them. But um, I lean a little bit more in the direction of like you guys, where it's like I'm very confident that I'm going to be able to get them to come back, or I'll tell them come back to me X weeks or anything like that. That's a big part of what I do as well. For a long time, I had people where it was like once a month, twice a month, guaranteed. They like prepaid for that, and it was like you were committed at that point. But when it's like the new person that's just trying it out and they're looking for that like here's I want a jump start, it's the understanding of like what they're looking at and like what they can take from it, and then how to talk about it. Like I mentioned before, I think a big part of the game is talking and like being able to understand the game. And I think it's one of the things that especially in Smash Bros. People struggle with is conceptualizing why something is hard to deal with, or why they don't understand it, or why they don't like it. And it's where a lot of people tend to get stuck. And helping them develop that skill with me in the moment tends to have given me like the best results. Is some of the players who I've found, 2-2 might be edge of their PR, reaching all the way to PGR, primarily came from, okay, let's sit down for an hour and we're just going to watch this VOD and talk about the game. And if you are able to keep up with what I'm talking about, or even bring things to the table for me, that improvement rate rapidly increases because you're able to, like you mentioned, I think it was Ramsey, just like watching the VODs. You can watch a VOD and learn something from someone else instead of having to sit and play the game and experience it. And that's where I found like the information processing and problem solving is obviously the other thing, kind of like goes hand in hand with that, is really important at that mid level. Because once they start entering that, like once you reach that the hills and valleys of like, okay, you're breaking the 2-2 barrier, and it's like now you're fighting your PR players more frequently at the later parts of bracket, and it's getting harder, or you're going to the regional and you're getting out of pools and you're instantly losing. That, like Tony mentioned, it's like you're gonna go to lose, you're gonna be able to take more from that loss with the ability to converse and problem solve and observe in the moment. Where I feel like a lot of players before this barrier, they lose and their immediate feeling is I couldn't do anything. And that's what a lot of people come to me and are like, I don't know what to improve. And they're stuck. They don't know what they're doing wrong. And opening their eyes to that bigger perspective of like, how do we look at the game even when we're playing? Like, the number one skill, I don't even know if I'll call it a skill. The number one thing that I teach people in the game is to stop looking at themselves. It is the worst habit that I
Yep.
think every player, I've taught top players to stop looking at themselves, because it's natural when we get nervous to look at our own character and get stuck. And that's where the worst decisions are made. I've had some players that I've coached for so long, and even sometimes it'll be first time and I'm like, that's when you looked at yourself and you got nervous. And I see this is the situation we have to talk about, because you can, it's a form of like expression, and some people let that leak into the game when they get nervous. And that's, like I mentioned, like the bad habits, the bad decision making, or even freezing up. That's a really common one that people don't talk about enough, is like the doing nothing, not to watch, but because they don't know what's happening. And that's where like being able to see the game, keep up with the game, process what's happening, a great trick that I use is if I'm playing like online with someone or in person and doing a coaching session, we'll be playing and I'll just pause and I go, "Why did you die?" And they go, you hit me with this," and I go, "Why did I hit you with that?" And they sit there for a second and they have to think about it. And I'm like, "That's what we have to fix. You have to be able to know immediately, oh, I dashed and whiffed and then you up smashed me." And like, if you can do that, that's where you're going to start like really picking it up quicker, and you're going to stop making the same mistakes in succession. And that's a big thing for that mid-level player, because it's also a very tangible thing. A lot of people like to feel like they're improving, especially in that like 0-2 to 2-2. They want to be able to look at themselves and go, "Wow, I'm so much better at the game now," even after like a couple months. And I think this is a good middle ground of like a very important skill, and it's something that they can physically experience as well.
That's cool.
So-
you guys guide your students so much. Most of the time, I'm like, I'll tell you what to do, and then you put in the work. You know what I mean? Like
You the cocktail, bro. You're nuts.
Well, I feel like your style is more like you put out a bunch of different roadmaps, and you're trying
Yes.
and you're trying to be like, okay, I need to break down these concepts very quickly for all these different roadmaps. So you have like a long roadmap, but I think the flaw of that is sometimes they're not going to be able to digest all the concepts within that hour, right? But if they
Yeah.
are able to digest each of these concepts that are all these roadmaps that you're giving them, it's a shit ton of value, right? But and
Yeah,
obviously
and
you try your
that's
best
also,
to
like-
break down the concepts as best as possible.
Exactly.
right?
And like whenever I coach, I give them a document. Like I write down everything and I explain it in a document, so they have like a written document to fall back on, and I give them the VOD of our session as well. So like, and whenever I coach someone, I always tell them like, if you have any follow-up questions, you can ask them for free. You can just DM them,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah,
I'll
same.
just follow up on that. So like, yeah, like I think it's cool. Like I like you guys' approach. I just, and this is more like a personal thing, but I get tired sometimes of people who like want me to do the hard work for them. You know what I mean? And like, there's nothing wrong with wanting help, of course. But if someone comes to me and it's like obvious that they don't want to put in the work, but they do want to improve, like I think that's like a big pitfall for a lot of like mid-level players, is that they go to coaching to feel like they have done all that they could rather than to actually get like the guidance that they need. But that's just like my personal interpretation. I'm sorry, Tony, I cut off your speaking time, so I'm gonna let you get to what you wanted to say.
You're good. No, that's a perfect seed too, because I was gonna say, so generally whenever someone approaches me to learn something about the game, if they don't know what they're looking for, we start off at the building block to identify that, and then sometimes there'll be players who are already capable of consistently pulling off their B&Bs, or already familiar with some of the basic tenets of the game, like what's good, what's probably not good. And so from there, usually we like to identify where they're at. So like Charles mentioned, there's a very large roadmap for like mid-level players. So for me personally, I have a very large number of steps that I kind of break that down into. So obviously there's players who have never been to a tournament. There's players who go to a tournament. There's players who are consistently cashing that tournament. And then there's usually a step between those two things. Like for many players there, it can take years to reach just from entering tournaments to cashing out at tournaments. And even then, it's probably only going to be once in a while, or if you get a good bracket, or if you're just playing hot and other people are not. And from there, even if you are winning tournaments, every tournament is going to be a different level of difficulty. And even within the context of tournaments of a region, each region is going to be a different kind of difficulty. Not necessarily just, oh, well, this is a level 1 tournament, this is a level 2 tournament. There's different challenges between different kinds of matchups, different kinds of meta games, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's very complex. And one player can go to a completely different region, have dominated the first region they came from, and then lose in the second one, even if the second one is generally a weaker region, just because they're unprepared and unpracticed for the new challenges in that second metagame. And so the idea is, generally, as Ramses mentioned, I believe, it was either Ramses or Charles mentioned that you want to identify their goals. You want to identify where they're going, and then I usually ask them what they have that's supposed to get them there. This is generally what I consider to be talent. And by talent, I mean, what starting resources do you have right now? How much money do you have to attend events? How much or what people do you know who are going to help you learn the game? What practice do you have? You can't just spawn off and just say, oh, I'm going to go give Cosmos $100 to play me in a friendlies for a day. It's not how that generally works. So you just can't trade resources one for one. But at the same time, whether you are playing with Cosmos or Jimmy Lou, who's Aegis down the street, these are things that are going to affect your rate of improvement. And it's not a simple matter of playing with a better player. It's a matter of what kind of skills those are going to develop, which leads into another kind of talent. What kind of skills do you have? What life experiences do you have up to this point that you have practiced learning different things? Like, for example, one thing that people tend to be talented at, if they have a good rhythm, is usually they can play instruments at a high level, or they have years of experience playing music. Mathematicians can obviously prosper at some cases. Like people with a background in computer programming tend to think about the game in a very direct and calculable way. Not everyone needs to learn critical thinking the same way, although that is something I try to impress upon all players if I think I'm going to spend significant time with them, is to actually go through the Socratic learning process with them. Actually go through and ask questions about how do you know that you know things, and what makes you certain that those things are true. Things like that. Another aspect to consider is that not all people have the same level of self-awareness. And so when you're asking people for goals, sometimes they're lying to themselves, and sometimes they don't even know that they're lying to themselves. For example, if a player comes to me and they're going 1-2-2-2, I can look at their skill set and see that they just need to connect a few dots and they're going to make multiple levels of progress. Not everyone getting the same tournament results are actually at the same skill level. There's different kinds of skills, again, that you can have, and these skills are differently valuable because each game tests different skills to different levels because they're differently valuable. So the idea is figuring out what they have and then leveraging my experience, because I've probably been doing high-level games for a couple decades at this point. So the idea is I just have a level of experience where I just kind of see things and can eyeball, well, I know that you're probably going to go here based on the current track of improvement that you're on. And so if somebody's goals aren't measuring up with what they actually are currently on track to do, we find out what skills are missing, what talents are you missing, and what time can you put in to develop the talents that you're missing so that you can develop those skills. And then change your situation. So change your environment if you need to. If you realize that your reaction times are a little slow, what are you doing to improve your reactions? What are you doing to improve your recognition? Like the things that you're reacting to sooner, what images, what reflexes you're using, the muscles. Do you have the thumb strength to mash the B button for your Luigi Cyclones? These are all things that can just take literal time to develop. And it's not a simple matter of, oh, I just need to know to press the B button real fast. Like, that's not very actionable. But if you practice pressing the B button a little bit faster every single day, it might not even be within the time frame you want. But if you give it a couple of years of mashing the B button faster and faster every day, eventually you're going to have the best B button mash in the world. And that's just how that works, is you've got to give things a scale. You've got to realize what's necessary to get to those. And again, these are talents that take time to develop that you can learn, but if you don't have them, then you don't have them, and that's not a tool that we have in our repertoire yet to accomplish your goals. And so usually at this point, if I think that someone's goals are unrealistic, I'll usually just be upfront and say, this is what I actually think you're on track for. This is what you would need to invest. And the way I used to ask this question is, in pursuit of your goals, what are you willing to sacrifice? What part of yourself are you going to give up in order to accomplish this goal? How much time are you going to spend? How much money? What focuses in your life are you going to spend? You might need to actually give up an entirely separate hobby in order to make more time to develop your skills. Like maybe that hobby isn't conducive to Smash. Maybe it's you just like to watch paint dry on the wall. I don't know. Watch TV. Something to that effect. That's not going to help you get better at Smash. But if we can find something similar that can actually develop your skill, for example, a common hobby that people have for like reaction monsters is something like soccer or football for our international audiences. those not necessarily things that you would correlate with Smash skills, but again, there is a very broad series of activities that can help you develop skills that will have a real impact on your ability to develop talents in the game. And so figuring out which of these you've already developed usually is enough for us to find either a character or a way to shape your current skill set and direct that so that you can develop it through Smash in order to kind of bring out what's going to give you the shortest term results. And the reason for that is because most players don't necessarily have the patience to go through the time necessary. And so it's, as Zeke mentioned, most players tend to look at their play, and if they don't see results pretty quickly, they get discouraged. And so they don't have patience or faith in the process to just kind of take your L's for a few months and just keep going 0-2, and then just one day you're going to wake up and realize you're not going 0-2 anymore. Like, people don't have patience for that. At most, you're going to be lucky to get like 2 tournaments, even if they're back-to-back tournaments in the same week. Like, if you get 2 tournaments where they go 0-2, you're probably sticking with a fairly patient person at that point. But most people, if they don't see results right away, they just lose their motivation, which is important not just for long-term growth, but because when players trust the process, whether that's through faith or just because they feel like they're seeing the results, they're more likely to put in the time and energy to sacrifice more in order to continue developing their skill set. And so ideally, whatever I'm looking for at this point is to develop the onset for loops, development loops. So specifically, you're looking for creative thinking and critical thinking, you are looking for people to look at problems analytically and to also learn to find pleasure in solving those problems and in identifying problems to the point where the reflex to getting a loss or having a setback is, ooh, that's something exciting to learn, or what is my counter to that? Because if people are feeling negative emotions before they start thinking about things, then they usually don't get around to the part where they start thinking about solutions. And so it's important to teach people to essentially teach themselves automatically. And then from there on, it's a matter of cultivating that process within them until it's eventually to the point where it's going to develop itself. And that, from my perspective, is where we actually get into like high level. You can be a bot who is brain dead and does not understand the game that well and make it to high level Smash. And I'm not going to call it names, but there are people who
Super Saiyan mid-levels
who will consistently make it into like cash placements at regional level events and not actually have a full thought process going on. They're just going to do the same things every single time. They have a single basic mix-up, and it works or it doesn't work. And they're not going to understand why it doesn't work if it doesn't. And they'll just, they lose to the roadblocks, but it works. And you might be surprised because sometimes it's just a matter of being able to have certain skill checks in place. Obviously, this applies to things like Kazuya is more straightforward, where if you just don't have the skill check to consistently play around his bread and butter and he can get it, you're not going to beat him. But there's plenty of other characters similarly. Like, it can even be something like a fast character, like one of the fast fallers. If you can't react to it and you don't understand that you're supposed to read ahead, then you're just going to misplay the matchup constantly. And they're going to get so much equity that they're just going to overperform against you. So little things like that. Again, it's a matter of matching up skill sets to metagames and then finding the short-term results so that they will continue developing those skill sets, is my perspective on developing mid-level into high-level players.
Can I ask a question, Tony? So something that I find very hard about being concrete about skills is that we don't know what skills go into Smash. Like, we know a few that definitely go into Smash, but we don't know everything. So when you say, well, I like to identify what skill is lacking and then, like, give them feedback on how to improve, have you ever run into a situation where you're not sure what exactly the skill is that they're lacking?
I would probably not know if I did miss it, just because I would be ignorant of my own ignorance.
Yeah, that's fair.
So as a rule of thumb, It's just a matter of I'm going to identify the skills that I've already identified through prior experience, and I am always expanding my range. But it is very likely that I have seen skills, not recognized them, and then just left them on the table for that player, and probably failed players in that sense before. So I also would say that there has never been a player that I didn't find some level of skill or skill sets that they could leverage towards their goal.
Okay.
So, but that doesn't mean that we can't do better.
Oh no, of course. Like this is not a critique, but more like because like I know you try this approach, and there are times where when I reflect on it, I find it very very hard to pinpoint exactly what skills it is. Maybe I'm trying to be like too inclusive, as in like I'm trying to cover everything. But no, yeah, I just wanted to know that. Thank you, Tony.
I will say, I think that this is a much more practical approach when I'm not working with a player who already has an established system. Because I think I can speak for everybody here in that the most common low-hanging fruit to pick up, the easiest improvement is to actually provide a system to a player, regardless of their skill level, in order to iterate on their own improvement, in order to recognize whether it's something like Charles's reaction point or refresh rate system, identifying when and where they're losing track of their character, like Zeke mentioned. These are all things that we can introduce to a player that they might not have. And there's multiple kinds of systems. There's multiple dimensions in which I think we can apply those systems, which again goes to the skill set, because different systems apply to different skills. Because obviously, if you're playing whack-a-mole with someone who wants to be able to write an essay on a subject, they're probably not going to be very satisfied with whack-a-mole style systems. Whereas a player who just wants to press the buttons is probably not going to enjoy those essays. And it looks like Charles is the inactive one now.
No, Charles.
It was inactive.
So
yeah, I think it's kicked you to AFK.
Yeah, it kicked you.
You're too comfy, dude.
Never had that
Smash
happen.
University bot came for him. Holy moly.
Can I bounce off of this conversation because I really like it?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
A really common thing that I do, if I have a player, especially in that mid to high level where they're like on the edge of the PR, and I'm like, and I'm struggling to find like this is something that you absolutely need to fix, that's where I'll take a step back, and more times than not, I find that there is a gap in knowledge. I'm not going to name names, but we've all seen X top high level regional like player or whatever, where you're like, you didn't know that?
Shielding is frame 1.
Oh,
yes,
I'm not
shielding
gonna,
is
we're
frame
not gonna
1.
go into the details, but sometimes it's like the craziest things. And those gaps in knowledge tend to be what I like. That avenue is what leads me to the okay. This is the avenue you're missing completely. And so I'll take a step back and kind of lean how I would go about it with the like lower level players or the more entry level players, like we said, and start to explore like what they conceptually understand about the game, rather than just like talking about playing. And that's been the thing that's helped me the most in that situation, where I've had a player come to me and I'm like, well, you're not bad at this game, but there's something you're missing and I'm not exactly sure what it is. And that's where like talking to them and being like, you don't get this. You're there, or you don't see this at all. And it could be like a concept. It could be something with neutral. It could be advantage state, whatever it is. It could be a matchup that there's a tool that they don't understand, and that's like the roadblock. And then the other thing that I really like to do for players at that level is to start compartmentalizing concepts and relating them to each other.
Oh yeah.
So a really common thing that people do is they're like, this is how I play this matchup, and this is how I play this matchup. But what you can do is be like, I play these matchups similar to each other, and these interactions and these tools are similar to each other, and to start making it like really compound, making things simplified. And that also tends to lead where like a struggle is, because that a common thing that will happen there is just simple problem solving in the moment is like a really big one for those players, where they're like, oh, I'm really good at fighting this character that I know is like this, and then I'm like, well, why are you not fighting them the same way? And then building off that. And 9 times out of 10 they're like, I don't know why. Why am I not doing that?
I think
Yeah.
something that is cool is you've ever seen like the bell curve meme? Where like on one side it's like haha funny button, and then like at the top of the bell curve is like no, you cannot just press the funny button, and then the very end is like haha press the funny button.
Yeah.
It's almost like every single skill is somewhere on that bell curve. It's like so true. So if someone like if you're at the beginning, you're a novice, you're just doing it because it feels good. If you're at the top, it's like you're in the point where you're learning more about it, you're trying to contextualize everything, and it makes it too complex. And then at the end, you simplified it back to a point where it like makes sense, and you just do what feels good, but you have all the experience to like do what feel. It's like the difference between improv from like a starting jazz musician versus an expert, right? Like one is going to sound like shit, the other improv is going to be amazing. So like most of the time when I'm looking at something, I'm just like, where are they on the bell curve, you know? And most of the time, like again, there's two types of mid-levels, right? Like there's the people who just like have some sort of intuitive sense, and there's like usually what I find in their profile is that there's certain aspects of their play that they've developed like to the end of the bell curve. They just do the right thing because it feels good and it's the right thing. But then there's like it's a profile where there's certain things that are super developed and certain things that are not developed at all. And then there's like the people who are, you know, like the 5 to 10% who like you know, have that prior competitive experience, who want to do everything correctly, and they're like just like square in the middle of the bell curve. It's just like everything is too complex, everything makes sense, but it also doesn't make sense. And so like once I understand like that profile, I think that helps me a lot with helping them, well, get to the next step a lot as well.
Oh, hey, he's back.
There he is.
All right, so I guess we can transition over to high-level play. This is where it gets obviously a little bit more complicated. And this is something, the concept I'm about to bring up also applies to when I'm coaching mid-levels, just because I think this concept alone is very important. I guess I do it to all levels, but it's not so much to top level because they already have it down. Is being efficient with your time is very, very important. I think a lot of players think like, oh, I can just grind X amount of hours and I will get, the more hours I put into the game, I will get better at the game. And that's true to a certain point. Like you should, right? But sometimes people can go backwards, and it's so hard to gauge if you're improving or not, because you probably are. But then some people feel like they're going backwards because the results are going backwards. But you have to realize that this is not a test in college where it's like, okay, if I got, you know, every single question right except one, I get a 98%, and then, you know, everyone else can get 98%, or the whole class got every single answer right, so we're all fucking winners. Yes, we all win. Like, no, it's not how competition works. Everyone is improving, and there can only be one first place, one second place, one third place, fourth place, two fifth place, yada yada, right? So unfortunately for a tournament and competition, that's not how it works. And everyone's improving at the same time, but you want your improvement rate to be high. That's whenever I'm coaching someone, that's one of the biggest things I drive is, okay, we want your improvement rate to be as high as possible, right? So, and even in the beginning of a lesson, I will ask like, okay, how much time do you want at the end of the lesson to make a training schedule, to give your, like, I'll give out certain drills depending on what they want to improve at, right? Kind of some kind of blueprint. So it's like, okay, so this is what you're going to do. Like, this is your time management. This is what you do within that time management, right? So you got like 2 hours to play a day, 15 minutes to movement, 15 minutes to combos, 1 hour of like scrimming, like actually playing people, and then 30 minutes of VOD review, or round, like it's like a super general one, right? And then if they like say like combos, right? There's combos, and it's like, okay, what combos? Like, well, you want to like learn these combos with whatever character, or that could be like ledge trapping too, right? So another thing I do is I try whenever I'm coaching someone that's mid or higher level, I want to try to get I want to break down the game in a super base level and see what their understanding is of their character in these phases of the game. So there's neutral. So the way I break it down is there's neutral, and then there's 2 minor states of disadvantage, which is when you're in the corner or when you're on a platform. You're technically on the stage, right? But you don't have as much options as if you were like in neutral, like center stage, right? Like if you guys are both somewhat fighting for center stage, you just don't have that much stage, but you're still on stage. So you're on the platform or you're in the corner. Usually 99% of characters are not good in this scenario. There are some exceptions like Sonic and stuff like that, but for the most part, you know, most characters are not. This is a minor state of disadvantage. And I mean, even in the current meta, you could probably bump up corner scenarios to a major form of disadvantage because players are getting so good at pushing that particular state, but it's some type of disadvantage. And then I have categorized in major disadvantage, offstage, juggle, ledge, right? So these are usually where players close out stocks, yada yada, right? So I go through the player, I go with the player over all these different phases, and I want to see if they know their win conditions, right? And what their characters can do in these scenarios and what they should be doing and yada yada yada. And from there, I try to gauge like, okay, so say I'm, coaching a high level fox, or even just like I'm gonna just bring in ledge for an example. I don't want to overload the person like with a training regimen. So say they want to improve at ledge trapping specifically, and this is super common because I would say ledge is the most common disadvantage or advantage state in the game where you get stocks or get damage, right? So I'm gonna just use this one as an example since it's the most common. When I want someone to improve at ledge trapping, the first thing I ask them is, can you react to normal get up with a grab out of shield? Because this is the most common ledge stance that you're going to have in the game. Can you ledge trap someone by shielding by normal get up and threatening normal get up on reaction with a shield grab? If you cannot do that, already your ledge trapping is like, I wouldn't say dog shit, but it's not good, right? You're probably just like flinging out some hitboxes and stuff. But if that's your only strategy, then you're susceptible to reversals, right? Because if you're just flinging out hitboxes, they can probably do a ledge drop double jump option or something, right? So, and if you can't, and if you only throw out hitboxes and you don't shield by ledge, then normal or get up attack is now all of a sudden like a very strong option. I mean, it always is an option, right? But when you show that shield by normal get up, there's a lot of things going into that one ledge stance and the threat of that one ledge stance, but you can only threaten it. Like, I'll test people sometimes in tournament too. If I'm like in the lower part of grabbing, just normal get up right in their face and see if they can do it. And if they can't, you're like, oh shit, well, you can't shield grab on reaction to normal get up. Uh-oh, like that's a problem, right? So that's already like stage one. Get the training mod, or you can put a level 3 computer on training mode. They always normal get up. You won't know if you have like the specific timing of it correctly. Like you can't get them to buffer spot dodge out of it or anything like that, or buffer a shield out of it. So you can see the shield bubble and see if you like did it too late or whatever. But at least you're in the motion of like, oh, I see normal get up, I grab it. I see normal get up, I grab it. I see normal get up, I grab it. And you keep repeating that until you're able to do that. Then I give them a next step. Okay, so after you can react to normal get up with a shield grab, see if you can do it with a nair or something else, right? And then really, and then try to have them branch off into these different steps of like, see if you can react to someone's ledge jump and throw out like a full hop up air or like drop shield dash back, right? And then I give them different ledge stances and different things to do in said ledge stances. And it's one at a time though. I never want to overload someone. And I always make this very clear to like, okay, so this is the first step. When you can do this, then when you're in an actual game, so it's like there's a crawl, walk, and run phase. Training mode, friendlies, tournament, right? So that's the crawl, walk, run. Oh, now you can react to normal get up and grab out of shield, right? On the ledge. Try it in friendlies, right? And now you might see yourself just like throwing out a grab when they roll. Uh-oh, I'm not really reacting to normal get up. I'm kind of like reacting to like them doing some shit off the ledge. Now I got to focus in and like really tell if they're rolling or normal get up being yada yada and stuff like that. And then I just try to give them a bunch of different steps and be like, once you can do this, then you add this on, because now you're adding more to the mental stack, right? But you want to move on to the next one when you're doing it subconsciously. That's what I always tell them. If you notice you're playing friendlies and you're shooting by normal get up and you're not thinking in your head like, if they normal get up, I grab. If they normal get up, I grab. If they normal get up, I grab. If you're just like your mind's blank and they normal get up and you grab, now it's time to move on to the next one. Now you have subconsciously done that. All the training is paid off. Now it's just locked in as an option. Now you can see if you can like drop shield when you think they're going to do a ledge option. If you see normal get up, grab. If you see roll, dash stack in, right? So you can start expanding on the mental stack essentially, and then start going into different ledge stances and stuff. I'm not going to get into every single one. Obviously, this is not a ledge trapping video, but that's an example of guided improvement where you're trying. You have a list of things, and you're like, I'm going to try to build this into my subconscious, and then after that's built into my subconscious, go on to the next thing and try to build that into my subconscious. I think what a lot of players do is they'll see this huge list and they'll be like, all right, I got to react to normal get up, jump, roll, ledge drop double. And like they like overwhelm themselves. And then instead of moving one thing into their subconscious, they're like overwhelming themselves with this mental stack of like 10, and they're not going anywhere. Nothing's getting moved to the subconscious, because I'll tell you right now, when a top player is playing like 80% plus of the match, their mind is blank for the most part. They're
Yep.
because they need to react. They don't have time to just like think full on thought sentences and stuff. Maybe in between stocks and stuff like that, or games, but for the most part, they're putting all their mental energy into just actual execution and their subconscious mental stack. So
Being in the moment.
exactly.
Basically.
So I think that's a big step for players in the high level of play. I think a lot of high level players, there's a lot of just simple things like not looking at their character, like Zeke mentioned, and even things like understanding the way of improvement. So they're like hitting this wall where they're trying to learn a bunch of things and they're trying to cram it all together instead of taking it one step at a time and moving it into their subconscious. And I think that's the biggest thing, because high level players, they can beat top level players. It's just how consistent are they at doing that? And does it have to be a bad day for the top player? Does it have to be a good day for the high level player, right? So kind of breaking through that barrier is really tough, because obviously top level players, they're either really talented or they have a ton of experience, right? And understanding your win conditions with your characters and how you're going to lace that over with your improvement rate is so important. And then with high level players, also breaking down each of those scenarios, like watching their VODs and being like, oh, okay, do you have a specific problem? Like, do you get reversaled in a specific scenario? I think getting reversaled is one of the biggest things that top level players don't allow to happen as much as the rest of the players, right? And that's really what brings that level of consistency. They can react well in neutral, right? Or like react well at any phase of the game. Their refresh rate is really high. They don't get reversaled in scenarios where they have advantage, because the biggest swing in Smash is when you have advantage and then all of a sudden you're in disadvantage. Like, your opponent didn't have to win neutral. They didn't have to, like, they swung out a move or they did some desperate option in disadvantage and you got hit by it and now you're in disadvantage, right? So that huge swing, you have to mitigate that, and like watch Leo play, or like any like Leo, Spargo. A lot of the now sword characters have this privilege of like being able to execute on this very well, obviously, because they have disjoints. So it's like, oh, you try to do a desperate option, I have a disjoint, right? Up, tilt, back here, whatever. But especially like when Leo's dominant phase, like pre-quarantine and stuff, Leo would never get reversal, or very rarely, and he would always like position himself where it's like, I either get this hit because you're trying to reversal me, or you position yourself in the corner and I still have some type of advantage, right? So it's always setting up for like these win-win scenarios. But yeah, usually that's my biggest thing with high level players, is the improvement rate thing, and trying to guide them through like, okay, you really want to focus, and your improvement rate, like you have the skills to beat the top player, but their improvement rate is still ongoing, right? It's not like they're just halted here and so, oh man, you're just like a PvE boss, and once I get here, I'm good to go, and like you're not improving at all, and like I just boom, we're good to go. It's not like that. So you have to hone in your improvement rate, and that's why it's so hard to break in the top level. It is so fucking hard, because these players understand this improvement rate concept and it's very polished. So you need to have more improvement. Like, your improvement rate can't even be the same as theirs. It has to be more than theirs, because you still have to catch up, right? So kind of understanding that concept. And I tell players all the time, I know you guys mentioned it before, like having a list of things you need to work on. But off that list of things you need to work on, I always tell people, like, okay, when you go into a play session, look at that list and pick like 2 or 3 things you want to work on, but make sure they're like spread out through different phases of the game, right? Where it's like, okay, this is like a neutral thing I want to work on. There's this ledge trick I want to work on. And like, there's this juggle situation thing I want to work on. And like that, when you're playing in friendlies, you're not trying to win. You are trying, unless it's like a 4 or 5 man rotation, obviously, then you got to stay on and win. But if it's not, and you're just like grinding with like a 2 or 3 man rotation, then just focus on improving in those specific things. And even if you lose every single match, even if just one time it's like, oh man, I'm like really struggling on reacting to ledge roll, whatever, right? And I'm not punching with up smash, I'm punching with dash attack instead. If you played for an hour and you got 1 up smash on reaction to a ledge roll, that's a W, right? Like, you have now improved. You are seeing some kind of improvement. So focusing more on that aspect of the game, I think, is the most important thing for when I coach high players. And then when we get into top players, that is like all theory crafting, and we'll obviously get into that. But Ramses, what is your take on coaching high level players?
It's so cool listening to you talk about that because there's so much overlap between like things that I talk about, like, focus on like one thing per game state. And then the cool thing about telling your students something like that is that you're also practicing their refresh rate. Because if they have one thing per game state, they can only do that if they have the refresh rate to realize that the game state has changed, right? So stuff like that is really cool to hear. Really awesome. So my general goal when coaching is to give people like new perspectives, and I think that is where high level coaching, like where coaching high level players is really interesting because they generally have pretty well developed perspectives on the game. So sometimes you get a Super Saiyan mid-level and like it's pretty easy to tell them like, what to focus on. It's kind of the same as the mid-level. Like they focus on themselves, they have that really well developed. All right, let's add some of the outside factors. Very straightforward. But a lot of the high-level players that I've worked with, they have built, like, they usually have pretty unique profiles in terms of what they're good and bad at. So a lot of coaching high-level players to me starts with like listening. Like I always listen to my students, but when it's mid-level, I generally know what's going on because it's like, and this is like no offense, but it's just like the way you grow in any game. You generally optimize the low hanging fruit first. What is the low hanging fruit? It's what I can do, what I can control. It's what you learn in school, right? Like it's the the objective improvements. So, but when we get to high level, I need to start like just ask questions that give me insight on what their understanding of the game is. And that is often where the coaching starts. Now, again, there's a lot of like things that come up all the time, right? So think about things like, okay, this dude doesn't use stage control. Okay, this dude is not adjusting for the matchup properly. Okay, this guy does not understand grounded movement. Okay, he is swinging for where the opponent is instead of where they're going to be, right? Like there's a lot of things that just come up frequently. But what you get is that instead of being like, oh, you should like, fix that by doing this and that, oftentimes it becomes way more about the way someone thinks about the game, which in turn makes the session more of a mentality session in a lot of cases. So the way I think about the game, right, is that at the end of the day, it's about your understanding of the game and then your ability to project that understanding on the game. So at lower levels, oftentimes I work on your understanding of the game, right? So like the tools you have, how you think about things, blah, blah. So at a higher level, what you notice is that oftentimes people have the tools. It's just there's something stopping them from projecting that idea properly onto the game. So a lot of these sessions are mindset sessions. So it's things like, okay, well, you never clutch a game. Why is that? So oftentimes is when people, like I ask people like, okay, so what goes through your mind in these last scenarios? And they're like, well, I just want to win. And then we talk, okay, why is winning important to you? Why, and then like 90, and this sounds pretentious, but this is what it comes down to. Like 90% of the time, like it's some sort of like childhood trauma that like comes up in their play. It's like my mom never gave me validation, so I'm looking for validation from the Smash community, which means that winning is more important to me than improving, which means that when I'm about to win, what does my brain prioritize? The fact that I could win, right? So when the validation of winning is more important to your brain than the process of winning, right? In other words, the interactions, then when it is near, what is your brain going to naturally focus on? The validation, right? So what I often tell my stream, and I think this is like the best wisdom in the world, and I got it from the inner game of tennis myself. And that is that like every mentality issue is either you being in the future or being in the past. So it's either like something happened and like you're still salty about it, or like it doesn't really like like you don't approve of it, or it's something that is about to happen or that could happen that is so important to you that it occupies your mind. And at the end of the day, like Charles said, this game is about being in the present because it goes way too fast to not be in the present. So there's this, I don't know if you guys watch Core videos. They're like a really awesome channel, fighting game content.
Amazing
They did a
channel.
video on, they did a video on thinking fast and thinking slow. And something that they talked about in that video is system 1 and system 2 thinking. Now, they kind of brushed over it, but actually they didn't, but to expand on it, let's put it that way. System 1 thinking is your autopilot, and system 2 thinking, by Tony, is your deliberate pilot, right? So what you find is that a lot of high level players, they either over rely on their autopilots in terms that they never know when to include their deliberate thinking, or they over rely on their deliberate thinking. In other words, they play too slow to rely on their autopilot. So a lot of the times we're basically talking about like, okay, so like emotionally, why are these problems? But also the way you're thinking about things, like why are you relying on your autopilot? Why not? So a lot of high level players, they make amazing decisions. But they make them too slow. So what you find is that like they could beat a top level player, but they could beat Tweak because Tweak plays slower, but they couldn't beat Spargo because Spargo plays too fast. But then you have the opposite. You have like the Super Saiyan mid levels. They could beat Spargo, but they could never beat Tweak. Right. So what we're looking for is we're looking to create a balance where we rely on our autopilot as much as we can and try to make it approximate our delivered pilot, because that's all you can do, right? And then figure out like what is information that is important enough for us to take a dip in decision making speed and turn on our delivered pilot and make that adjustment, and then we just like shut it back off and then go back to our autopilot. So the way I explain is like, let's say you have like 100 autopilots set up. You got like the only thing you do during a game is your delivered pilot comes on and they're like, okay, we need like autopilot 97, and then it turns off, and then you go to autopilot 97, right? And then like if you want to talk top level, that's the point at which you start like basically combining them. So it's like we're using like autopilot 37 in mid range, and autopilot 76 in long range, and autopilot 11 in close range, right? And then you start like basically build a bearing your way out of a game. But like at high level, what I'm just looking for, like they probably have a solid strategy at this point. That's what I try to teach people when they get to high level. And now I'm like, okay, you have one solid strategy. Let's make 2. Let's make 3. Let's make 4. And let's start being able to use this as an RPS. So like when I'm looking at like lower levels, I'm like, I'm just trying to get you to play interactions. Just like if you're able to play interactions, like you're no longer low level. Then at mid level, I'm like, okay, let's think about the situations in which these interactions play, and then weave them together to form a basic strategy. And then at high level, we're adding more strategies together so that we can create an RPS of strategies. So when someone is Tweak and they're playing slow, you can play a strategy that beats slow play. And when someone is Spargo and they play fast, you can play a strategy that beats fast play. Right, and that's like just like a distinction that you can use, right? Slow and fast. You can also say aggressive and defensive. You can say aerial and grounded. You can say forward moving, backwards moving. Like all of those are strategies that you can build counter strategies to. So for high level, oftentimes like the new perspectives I'm trying to give is like, okay, well this is your strategy, because they always have one strategy. If they have multiple strategies, they're top level to me. But like if you're high level, most of the time you have one strategy. So like I just basically tell them this is your strategy. We're like, this is what they're weak to. This is like the RPS we're working towards. So we're going to learn 2 more strategies. And then we have 3. And that's like our standard RPS, right? 3 options. It creates a cycle. And then from there, like oftentimes they kind of like take off themselves. But most of the time, like developing 2 more strategies takes like half a year, something like that, maybe a little bit longer even. And then there's going to be a lot of roadblocks, right? Because now you're playing with punish, King K rule. Good luck, right? So that's really the process that I like to go about with high level players. Is I'm like, okay, well, we got the tools. Let's start rearranging them in a way that makes you more flexible. What do you think, Zeke? Do you think I'm right?
I have had players where I do that. And this is where one of the things that I guess I've advertised about my coaching is when you're at that mid to entry level to low level, whatever you want to call it, is like it's very much like this is what I'm teaching you. And I tell people a lot, like you can watch me teach someone else and I'm probably going to teach you the same stuff. Once we hit the like you're higher on your PR, you are now able to beat top players. You're getting it out of pools every single major. That's where it gets like specialized. And I really spend the time to tailor it for each person, whether it be about beating certain people. And this is where their goals really come in. Because I've had players at this space where they don't want to be the best player in the world. They want to be number 1 on their PR. And that's all they're interested in. They don't care about majors. They don't care about that. They just want to be number 1 on their PR and they want to hold that spot. And they're happy with that. And there are some people who are like, I want to be the next Leo. I want to beat everybody. I want to never lose again. And it's like obviously unrealistic to some degree, right? But it's like some people look really deep, like down the lane. And some people are like, that door is right next to me and I can open it, but I need your help. And the number one thing that I teach anybody at this space of like high level threat is confidence and how to use their confidence to their advantage and how to maintain their confidence. A lot of players in this situation, they're like, I know that I'm good at this game. I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm bad at. And when they're playing someone who's better than them, and the person they're playing against realizes what they're bad at, and they start to take advantage of them, their confidence immediately plummets. And that's where all these players immediately choke. That's when people lose game 5 to Leo that are like, oh my god, this like hidden boss almost beat Leo. Just kidding. Like he lost confidence and he choked. And I've had tons of players. I'll even like use an example of this where like confidence is really coming into play with someone I'm working with is Raven King. He's someone I've worked with on and off for many years, and now with me coming back in this new year, we've started working together again. And a big part of this is coming to terms with the things that he is really good at and he knows is good, and trusting himself to do that. And this kind of goes in hand with like what Charles was talking about is like the drills and the learning. And it's like once you know that your subconscious mind can do these things, it's like trusting yourself to do that. And this is like you mentioned too, like where the mindset coaching kind of comes in because people psych themselves out. They're like, well, Leo wouldn't neutral get up 4 times in a row. Absolutely not. He totally will. And you have to like let it happen and see it and be in the moment because the moment your doubt and everything starts to come in is where you drop from like, hey, you could be a top 20 player to you are going to lose the set and then immediately lose the next set because you're tilted that you threw that set. And you have to be able to deal with this situation because you will experience this. You will choke game 5 versus Leo. You will get 3-0'd by Proto Banham. Like it will happen, and you have to be able to deal with both of those things at this level. Because, like you mentioned, there's some players that you will naturally be really good at playing in, whether it be matchups, playstyles, whatever. And there'll be some players where you're like, bro, I'm speaking English while we're playing, and you are speaking Swahili, and it's a totally different game, and I don't know what to do. And you have to be able to deal with that and problem solve in the moment. And that's where I spend a lot of time, like, teaching them how to build their confidence and also finding peace with being like, yeah, I don't know what to do. And we kind of mentioned this earlier where it's like you have to your instant reaction can't be like a hard negative like that was awful and like this sucks or blah 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 blah. And unfortunately we see a lot of that, especially in Smash. That is a really big problem, I think. But I think a big thing is teaching them how to I guess coping mechanisms while they're playing that like being aware that like there'll be mistakes, there'll be things they don't understand, and how to maintain their composure because that's where you start or like a consistency in raising their skill floor so that it's not just they're having a bad day and I'm having a good day. It's that this is just another Wednesday and maybe they're having a bad day and I'm just coasting it. I'm just doing my thing. And also catching yourself when you start to like fall off that. And that's where like the thing I mentioned earlier, it's like the self-awareness is really important because you have to realize, oh, hey, I'm doing bad at this thing. So like I guess it's kind of a combination of a lot of stuff we've talked about is like they have all these different ideas and strategies. And you know, some days, like this is a big thing I used to teach like Cosmos, like some days you are gonna suck at ledge trapping. It's not a ledge trapping day. Find a different solution. Use the skills that you have and problem solve and find a different way to solve the problem. Sometimes it might not be enough. But if you can accept, I'm not doing this right. I don't have the time to like spend trying to feel it out again. Do something else. Find a different thing. You miss neutral get up on every single you miss grabbing it every time. Do something else. Stop trying to do it and like fixating on it. And this is especially in tournament where I think a lot of high level players get stuck is they want to prove I can do it. I can grab Leo's neutral get up every single time. And it's like you don't have to do that.
Or they fuck it up and they're like, I deserve it. So they overcommit to yeah, I get you.
And
I get you.
it's where that skill floor it like peaks in and it's like, hey, what if we dash attacked again for no reason because I really want to do it. That's a big thing. And then I guess the other side of it is really like people love, and I've said this on tons of podcasts over the years, and I've said it on my stream a million times. People love to make Smash more complicated. And it doesn't have to be. It's about making it as simple as possible because the more complicated you make it, the better the player is, the more they mix up all this stuff, your brain is going to short circuit and you're going to crash. And you're going to go from being this good to this good at game 5, minute 7. You're not going to be able to do it. the more simplification in what you do and your game plans and the way you play the matchup and all of the little intricacies is going to make it so that not only like your mental endurance makes it through, but like physically being able to play out all these different matchups, because that's the hardest part of the game, is like you have to mentally be able to go from playing Sonic to then going to play against the best Roy in the world. You have to be able to do that. And if you can't do it, you're not going to win Genesis. You're not going to win SmashCon. It's not going to happen, because that's what your top 8 run might look like. And that's like a skill you have to garner, is like my new favorite catchphrase is keep it simple, stupid. I like you have to keep it simple, because the moment you're like, okay, I've dash attacked, and I'll give an example. I had Raven King was playing with Tweak, and the thing I told Raven King to work on above anything else, I was like, I want you to find every single time you can dash attack him and understand why you get to dash attack him, and keep doing it until he doesn't let you do it. And there was a point where Tweak was like, I fucking hate that move. Please stop dash attacking. And obviously he's just like saying it out loud to himself and to his chat and whatever. But it's like, that's the point. You want to make someone reach that break point, and then it's like, do they learn, or are they now stuck? And it's like just looking for that one simple tool and all the things that that one tool can accomplish. And really understanding that both like physically in the game and mentally for the other player. And the higher the skill level you reach, it's like that one tool may have less leverage, but against a certain person, it might piss them off, and it might make them tilt, and it'll lower their skill floor, because they're so fixated on like, I'm not gonna let you dash attack me again. And then that's when you psych them out. Or like Tony said earlier, you just don't mix it up, and you're just like, hey, that one thing, I'm just gonna throw paper again and see if it works. And if it does, that's awesome. And these kind of go hand in hand, because you have to have the confidence to be like, I'm gonna commit to dash attacking until you tell me otherwise. And that's a thing that a lot of people like overcomplicate, where it's like I said, it's like, surely Leo won't do this again, and it's like, maybe he will. We're human, we're not machines. There's no rule that's like after the 5th time he's not gonna do it. Maybe he's stuck, maybe he's frustrated. You have to see it and be in the moment to understand that. And you have to have the confidence and like the precognitive understanding to just do it and go, when I see this, I dash attack. When I see this, I grab, and not be spending time thinking about it and doubting yourself. And there's a lot of work that goes in with that through practice and training regimens and everything like that, because you have to be able to go, I'm bad at this. I'm really bad at this. And it might be in the moment, or it might be after you just lost and got 13th to someone you've lost to for the 10th time, and you have to be able to deal with that.
Tony.
So, from my perspective, high level play, like Zeke said, every level of play is simple to a degree. It's a matter of everything is as complicated or as simple as you want it to be. And so I think it is very healthy to actually kind of overthink through things, make them very complicated, but you need to always cap that off by then re-simplifying it into chunks. Keep it simple, and the idea is you should generally leave situations as RPS, even if it is not as simple as an actual RPS situation, because usually once you get down to the risk reward, you're going to come down to there is a very clear most rewarding option or best risk reward option. There's going to be something that counters that, and then there's going to be a follow-up to that. And if there isn't, it's usually just a 50-50. And so things are usually 50-50s or rock, paper, scissors. So the concept here is identifying those simple things is usually what we're looking for. And then my general perspective towards Smash, although I do have many ways of approaching the game, and I have learned the game in many different ways and taught the game in many different ways, the most general way to look at it is to break things down into questions of who, what, when, where, why, and how. And so the idea is looking at the game as being able to use any one of these simple questions as a means to break down the entirety of the game is a different dimension of viewing the game. And so generally whenever I'm working with a high level player, I look at what dimensions I think they play the game. And if I'm not sure, just naturally talking to them, asking them questions is going to help me kind of understand how they understand the game. And sometimes I'll learn something new, but always what I'll have is I will always have one of those questions that they haven't viewed the game as. And so essentially I just offer them something unique, the perspective that they're unaccustomed to that Ramses mentioned, where it's something new. And then I'd say the most frequent one of these is kind of, I think it's the same concept that both Charles and Ramses referred to, but I have a slightly different way of wording it, is to find a balance of looking for where your refresh points are, your decision points. And so the idea is, if I'm watching your VOD and I see a character with an idle motion, that is a sign that you are wasting your time. And by that I mean, ultimately we can look at the game as a sum of actions that affect the game, and then at the end of the game, generally the player who made the most impactful actions as a volume is going to be the player who is the best player in that game, even if they don't win. That's generally how I look at the better player, as the person who makes both the most impactful and then the larger number of those impactful situations. And then it's some sort of function of those things. So even if you are a Ganondorf player who lands like 10 Ganon forward smashes, that can be an example of being both a numerous and highly impactful number of situations, whereas usually at top level, you're going to see dozens or hundreds of these small situations where things just tend to always end up in their favor because of how they skew the risk rewards of their positions. And then on top of that, you'll also see the occasional big reward play where they just get like a 0 to death combo or something of that nature. And so looking for what's missing and then just offering that is essentially the final stage of low-hanging fruits, is where I would say this really comes in. And I would say this even goes toward the lower end of top level for some of the relatively top level players who are considered to have fallen off. Usually there's something like this there that they can pick back up and get right back on top. And I would say that this is probably my personal most common range, is high level players who are looking to essentially go from making it out of pools at majors to winning regionals or winning majors. And I would say that's the players that I work with the most personally. So it's almost always just a matter of recontextualizing the game and then helping these players to relearn the game to give them that last push so that they have an entirely new perspective. So it still goes down to System 1, System 2, but ultimately it's a matter of, well, what if you played your character as Sheik, but you're actually Donkey Kong? And so now you're looking at the game as, I'm Donkey Kong with Sheik's frame data. And so you're going to be able to basically start the next stock with a completely different set of habits and perspectives, and your opponent's not going to be able to read that. Alternatively, I also teach people to learn to identify and attack the systems or lack thereof of other players. If you see someone is completely bereft of a mix-up situation, it's very common for players to overthink situations. Like, for example, Raven King tends to personally overthink things and think, oh no, this is a very good player. This doesn't make sense. They're definitely planting something for the future. No, dude, they're actually just, they're going to pick paper for the third time.
They're just dashing back and forth mindlessly.
They're just standing there ominously. This is a checkmate situation. I've already lost. And it's like they put down their controller to go grab a drink. So I would say those are the most common situations. But as everyone here said, everyone's situation is different, and talking to the players and finding a low-hanging fruit that they haven't picked yet is generally all I'm looking for high-level players. And it's actually, I'd say, the most straightforward kind of player to work with, because these are always people who are invested. And so the problem I mentioned before, where players lie to themselves, usually higher-level players, even if they are lying to themselves, they're still going to go through with things. And so it's usually a matter of finding a way for you look at what they're already doing to loop their improvement process, and then you kind of replace the inefficiencies within that process and say, wasting your time here, why don't you do this instead? And also, to be clear, to anyone who is listening to this, if you are not using training mod, you're throwing. You should have training mod. I think the only kind of character that can get away without it is like the absolute dedicated runaway players, like Pac-Man, Duck Hunt, et cetera, et cetera. But even then, they're still going to very much get a solid reward from being able to get your target combos consistently, to get your reflexes tested by just setting CPUs to jump in at mix-up times so that you can practice your reflexes, so that you can learn to react to a neutral get up instead of just knowing, oh, well, the CPU always neutral get ups at this position. These are all reflexes and things that you can engender in yourself that you should learn, that are reflexive and should be reflexive. And if they're not, that's a hole in your system. And just looking at somebody's VOD and seeing that they can't react to neutral get up, like Charles mentioned, that's just an easy pickup. And teaching players how to recognize that hole in their opponents in real time and say, listen, if you see this, this is a tell that they're missing this entire area of play. You can just do this one thing over and over, and they're just going to get really frustrated, and they're not going to beat it, even though they are a high level player. This is just a hole in their play. And so learning to take advantage of those weak spots is usually just an easy way for high level players to improve, I'd say.
All right, so we are hour 40, so we'll try to make it quick with top level players. I think with top level players as well, the skill difference, there is a gap between high and top level, but I don't think it's too large. And I think the main thing for me with my experience with top level players is theorycraft and mentality, and dealing with nerves, which I think falls under mentality. And I think there's a lot of crossover with high level and top level when it comes to mentality and nerves. And then with top level, the main thing that is different is the theory crafting, because usually with a top level player, it's like, oh, well, we can't just study a player that's better than you with this character because, well, you're the best of this character. So we're going to have to just like figure out this matchup or something like that, right? And with mentality and nerves, I think the baseline with nerves is just trying to stay in the present as much as possible, and also realizing when you're nervous. I think that's a big one that I've talked with Void a lot. And when you realize that you're nervous, you also can understand that you have specific habits when you're nervous. So at least you can fight specific habits where it's like, oh, when I'm nervous, I like to dash attack out of the corner a lot. So if you realize that you're nervous, you're like, well, as long as I don't dash attack out of the corner, I'm at least going to learn something new about my nervous play, right? And something like that. If you can't calm yourself down, at least understanding and knowing that you're nervous is fine, because then you at least branch from that information of like, oh, these are the nervous habits that I lose games to, right? So as long as I can expand off of that and lose differently, or hey, maybe even pick up a win, right? That'd be nice too. But understanding that, and then nerves usually happen less and less the more times you are experiencing something. So the more times you go to regionals and you get to that spot where you're getting out of pools, right? Or the more times you go to a major and you're like almost about to beat a top player, that usually the first time that happens, you're going to choke because it's the first time you're experiencing that, right? So that's like baseline advice for those kind of things. And then sports psychology books are really nice. I know when I started coaching top level players, that's something I started diving into, reading more sports psych books, and that helped a lot. And then the theory crafting part is my favorite. I always remember like Peeb got a couple lessons with me, and like trying to figure out Mega Man versus Roy was like a really fun process. Going through the whole Diddy Kong phase with Tweak was a really fun process as well, and kind of breaking down like, oh, okay, so usually like for Mega Man versus Roy, it's a tough matchup, right? And it's like, okay, well, maybe instead of using pellets, you're gonna have to do more Saw Blade. Maybe you just have to like fare more neutral, even though that's not really a Mega Man thing. You're just gonna have to like play, like use some of your shittier tools. But the risk reward, it's like, okay, if you hit a fair and neutral, at least you can set saw. What is the win condition, right? Saw Blade in hand, so you have better out of shield. How do you create that scenario? Well, pellets aren't going to give you that scenario. It just does chip damage if he swings through it, yada yada. And then what if you just fare more neutral, or back air more neutral, or go for more of these like things that create distance to get the Saw Blade? So that's like a string of like one of the many things that me and people like got throughout that lesson and stuff like that. So I'm just bringing up random examples. And then even like Tweak with Diddy, really, I know when he came up to me with the character and was like, dude, I think this character is really strong. I think if like there's a lot of potential, and he showed me a bunch of stuff. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, Transcendent Banana, Z drop out of shield from behind really quick, right? And just kind of trying to string together all these tools. I think that part's a little easier nowadays because the game's more solved. So there's less theory crafting, than before. I think before there was more theory crafting, and there is still a good amount of theory crafting that needs to be done now. And I even remember when I first started coaching Tweak, it was like right after SmashCon, and we were like fucking around with the idea of like Wario using the bike in neutral, which is just really funny because we see Gluto use that like a shit ton now. But me and Tweak were theory crafting that kind of stuff like way back then. He didn't really commit to Wario, but it's cool to see the different theory crafting patterns and how it overlaps with other players, other character specialists nowadays in the meta and stuff like that. So yeah, Ramses, what is your experience with top level players?
So similar to what Tony said, he said high level players are some of the easiest to work with. That is like my perspective of top level players, because like it's like, you know how like I said, it's like first you build like your tools and then you project like your understanding of the game.
You get to the fun part
on the
immediately.
game. Exactly. Like there's no building up tools. It's just like all like what's going wrong in a projection. So something that I noticed with top level players is that there is actually like they're also the hardest to coach. Not as in like they're difficult to coach, but more like because it is such a collaborative effort. Because they're feeding you information on like their character in the matchups that like you couldn't possibly know, right? Like I cannot know the nuances of Wario to the same degree that Glutny does. Just like straight up cannot. So they're feeding me information and then I pass it back, right? So it's more of a collaborative effort. So in that sense, it's harder because a lot of the quality of the coaching depends on how well your coaching methods vibe with them and how good they are at being coached in general. I've coached top level players that are really bad at getting coached, and it was just like pulling teeth all the way through. Even when I communicate like, hey dude, like, you know, like I'm gonna need this from you, blah blah. Some people just like they're not in the right mindset for that. And that's totally fine, right? Like I'm not that doesn't mean that they're incapable of doing so. It might just mean that like maybe my methods don't vibe with them. Maybe they're not in the right mental state. Maybe they're just not used to it, right? There's a lot of possibilities, but generally I feel like the person becomes a lot more important at this stage. Outside of that, I basically have 3 goals when I'm working with top level players, and they're always the same. So goal number 1, we got to make as many decisions as possible. So I'm always looking for like opportunities, and this is to me this is a low hanging fruit of coaching top level players. I'm just like, where are you not making a decision? So for example, like you said, Charles, like if you're nervous, you can at least like recognize that you're nervous, but that's a decision that you have to be ready for to make. Like I'm now gonna play against my nervousness. If you're not making that decision, you're not controlling that situation. If you're not controlling that situation, there's no room for improvement, right? So first priority, to just find as many decisions that we're not making that we can. And then the hardest part to me is so you guys remember the bell curve thing I talked about, right? Where at the beginning, haha, press button, and then it's like, no, you can't just press the button, and then there's like, haha, press button. All top level players that I've worked with, they're at a point where like they have so many skills developed to the point where it's so intuitive, it is very hard to iterate on those skills. So again, like you guys gotta keep in mind, I haven't worked like really long form with top level players. So like I haven't worked with like Tweak for like weeks on a time. So like I don't know where their intuitive understanding what that is based on. So a lot of what I'm doing in the time that I have with them is figure out like what are they basing their intuitive choices on. So in other words, I'm helping them understand what they know, because oftentimes they know it, it's just like crystallized to such a degree that they cannot call upon it easily because it's so intuitive, right? So that's a huge process where we just go through like why do we make these choices, where does it come from, where are your choices built on? And oftentimes after that process, and this can be like easily like a few hours, right, after that we figure out, okay, there's maybe like a few factors in this decision-making process that we're not taking in well enough, or that we're not valuing well enough. And the tuning of these things, again, it's like, you know, the better you get, the more diminishing returns you get on your time. But that's why I'm here, right? Like I'm doing that work. So the tuning of like these factors, or adding like these minor factors, that can like then snowball and have like huge consequences. So I'm basically like, I'm taking their decision, I'm going back to like, what is it based on? That often takes a long time because it's so intuitive for them. And then once we know what it's based on, we can kind of like start playing with that. Whereas with like a mid-level player, like you're basing it on like 2 things. Like it's very easy to go back, get rid of that intuition, and then like build a new one. It's very hard for top level players. So first, make as many decisions as possible. 2, help them understand what they know, and then kind of like try to reconsider the decisions that we're already making. And then 3 is the theory craft for the things that we don't understand. So I remember when Gluto went to the US for the first time, he played against Cola. And Tony gave Cola a lot of habits to work with. And I was talking with Gluto, and Gluto was like, yeah, but he's just like preemptively swinging at where I'm gonna be. I don't know what I should be doing. And then I was just like, okay, well, like on a fundamental level, like this is what he's doing. This is the opportunity cost of his actions. Can we build a strategy that counters this type of opportunity cost decision making inherently? And then like he went and he tried it against like his local players, and I was like, just tell them to do this, and then just like try to counter it, right? And then he came back and it's like, well, this worked and this didn't work. And I'm like, okay, well, let's, retune, blah, blah. Basically what Charles said, right? So that's the theory crafting part. That's the fun part. That's like the like I'm creating new meta part of it, right? But I do think it is a lot more nuanced and it's a lot more collaborative than any other type of coaching. And it is like, I think if you're working with a top level player, it has to be long form. Like, and I'm not talking like a few months, I'm talking like half a year to a year minimum. Because I feel like you cannot help someone make better decisions if you don't know the systems that they use to make decisions. And 90% of the time they don't know the systems themselves either. It's just too far in the past. It's just too crystallized. So a lot of it is just like helping them understand why they're making the choices. Because like at the end of the day, so the way I look at a decision is like there's two things that go into a good decision. One is what you're factoring into the decision, and then two is how are you valuing all the individual factors in the context of each other, right? So like stage positioning, distance, percentage, matchup, tiredness, emotional stamina, right? Like all of these things. And at the end of the day, like again, at mid-level, it's easy to add more factors, and that's like low effort, high payoff. But at a certain point, you don't have new factors. So it's all about rebalancing how you're valuing these individual factors, and that's like very high effort, very low value comparatively, right? But that's the point that you eventually get at once you reach the top level. So a lot of it, to me at least, is getting into that valuation and basically just like fine tuning. And I'm talking about like top level, right? If you're looking at like the lower end of top, it gets more and more closer to like high level coaching. So that's my perspective. What do you think, Zeke? You've been looking very contemplative.
I'm thinking about how I wanted to say what I want to say.
It's hard. I actually wrote down notes. I was like, I'm gonna say it all as well as I can.
I think I'm one of the very few people, and this is not meant to be like, oh, look at me, I'm so cool, I've done so many things, but it's more like I have experienced taking someone who was like a 2-2er and working with them all the way to top player and like top 10, top 20 contention. I've experienced having the pre-existing like top 10 player come to me and then working with them for like X amount of time. And I've experienced top player comes to me one time. And like the difference and how that works and like the value of all those things has always been something really interesting that I've thought a lot about. And even like my own feelings about each of those things has like developed in different ways. And something I've learned to appreciate is like you mentioned that it's really hard to work with like those top players because they're set in their ways. They think about systems in different ways. And a lot of times they've come to me and it's not like, hey, tell me how to fix this. It's tell me how you think about this. And then I'm going to think about it.
They're going to interpret what you said. Yeah.
And it's what I've learned to appreciate. Like I used to get really frustrated about it and be like, they're not listening to me, but it's not like that. And that's my own maturing and things like that. It's more letting them take that information, that perspective, and tuning it to their systems and then use it their way. And like, I'm not going to name specific players for obvious reasons, but I've had a handful of players who either I've worked with a long time, long break, and then they come to me one time, or have even just come to me one time. And I was like, here is what you need to know. And this is what I believe you need to know. And this is a system you're lacking, whether it be how you're playing against this matchup, this type of player, whatever it is. And they've blatantly been like, I think you're wrong. And that's fine. And we can disagree. And like, I think of it like this, and it being a back and forth and in between like a debate and a disagreement. And then years, 1-2 years down the line, they do find that answer. And I've found peace with that personally, where it used to frustrate me, admittedly. Because I'd be like, if we could sit down and talk more, that yada yada, etc. Mm-hmm. But I think that's one of the hardest parts. It's a lot easier, and like I said, I've had the privilege of getting to like mold a player and mold their systems the big example having been Cosmos in the past, where I can say something and he already understands what I'm saying. I don't have to explain what I'm saying. And there are lots of other players that I've worked with that are like that during different parts of their journeys. Raven King, I used to coach Sonics, I used to coach Locusts for extended periods of times in different steps of their journeys. And whether it be the theory craft level or the how do I beat this one specific player who plays the specific way part of their journey, it's always very unique. And spending the time to really pick that person's brain and like cater it to them is the most important thing that I think the majority of people drop the ball on, whether it be coaches or other players giving each other advice, is they say it from their perspective instead of spending the time to understand this person's perspective and make it make sense. And that's why there are coaches and that's why there are players, because that's I think the skill gap there for that. But when it comes to like working with these like top players, um, having really set concrete goals, I think, is a really important thing that a lot of them are missing out on, and being able to adapt to that goal to the landscape is where they get lost, because sometimes it's like, hey, I've lost this guy.
We've lost
10
him.
times.
We've lost him.
Where a lot of these players get stuck is, they're like, I have lost to Leo 8 times, and I want to beat Leo. But beating Leo isn't the next step. The next step is overcoming the way these players play, and it's the staircase, and it's experiencing the hills and the valleys. And where a lot of these top players, and I think it was Tony who mentioned like the players that he tends to work with the most, and it's one of my favorites, is the player who's fallen off, who is ready to be remolded, because they it's either they're the most open-minded or the least open-minded, they're not ready to learn. But when 9 times out of 10, when they come to me and it's like, hey, I'm falling off, I don't know why I'm falling off, and it's like you rebuild the systems, and it's like they're the most impressionable at that moment.
Malleable, yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I think the best experience comes out of coaching these top players, is when it's like there is a very set concrete goal and it is understood like this is the next step I need to overcome. I have a good foundation. I am good and bad at these things. I have overcome these difficulties, and now this is the next thing. And when it's that hyper focus, and sometimes in the journeys this has gotten like you end up working your way up and then you work your way back down, and that's where the hills and valleys kind of come in. And catching someone on their way down the valley and like catching them so they don't go too deep is, I think, the thing that I find the most joy in, is like catching them and helping them understand like, look, there's another hill right there. This is how we together can get you there. And spending the time finding that gap in knowledge or that mindset flaw, or innovating. Like my favorite thing personally has always been innovating. I mean, like I said, the longest player I ever worked with was Cosmos, and creating the way you played this abomination of Corrin was the most enjoyable thing I've ever done in Smash.
Abomination?
It's an abomination, all right?
Come
We can
on,
appreciate
dude.
that pin in Smash 4 was an
That was my
abomination.
main. Come on, dude.
But like other opportunities where I've gotten to do stuff like that is with like Ryu, when I worked with Locust in Smash 4, again to reference that. It's like, and helping him build the systems to be able to beat some of the really crazy top players, where people are like, whoa, like this guy from Canada is going toe to toe with these top players with a character that isn't super popular at the time at that level. Like, I love getting to do that. And like, I guess Echo, any of you Kazuya players who want to win, please hit me up. I want to break that character so bad, and I just haven't found the right person yet. But it really is those like top players who I think there's a combination of like they have to be at a moment in their own mindset and journey to be impressionable and open-minded, to then receive the coaching. And then one of the other things that I always really push is, I think there's 2 ways to go about it with like coaching at that level. It's either you get one coach and you really focus on working with that person and experiencing this journey and like molding a system while occasionally getting different perspectives, or it's a very personal experience and you need to be spending more time getting as many different perspectives on a singular thing to understand it at a deeper level to elevate your own perspective. And I think a lot of players get lost in the mix of these two, and that's something that like is still being built in the space. I think is that idea of either one coach or going, this is my journey and I just want as many perspectives as possible and how to use that information effectively. I know that was a bit of a rant, but anyway.
Oh, it's good. It's good. Tony?
So there's a few different relationships that I've had with top level players. I'd say the most frustrating one that I've worked with is I don't want to learn, I just want to win.
Oh my god.
Which, to be fair, that's more a matter of my particular relationship with it. So I have said it before, but I don't really think of myself as a coach in general. I view myself as more of an analyst. And one of my goals when working with people is to actually push Smash to a higher level of play in general. And so generally my personal goal when I'm helping people is to push them into being a better class of player. Because from my perspective, there is a class of play in Smash that doesn't exist yet that is humanly reasonable to attain. And I want to see it. So for those players, they tend to get frustrated with me. And so that's usually not a kind of player that I work with well. These are usually like the players who are looking to specifically just pay for like a VOD analysis or whatnot, which to be fair, VOD analysis is my specialty. There is probably no one on earth that I've been unable to break down while studying their VODs. But just breaking someone down in a VOD analysis is not enough. You need to create a way to both simplify that into a functional system, communicate that to someone, and communicate that to someone in a means that they can use the tools they already have, because they're not going to relearn the game just to follow your game plan. And so the idea is you essentially need to learn their language, communicate this system that you're creating from scratch, and communicate it to them so that it's also effective and preferably consistent. There are players that I do coach in terms of I actually consider myself a coach to them. These are significantly more detailed affairs. These are things where we don't just manage their gameplay, we manage what they're doing with their life, their time budgets. What are you eating? What exercise are you getting? What does your nutrition look like? Et cetera, et cetera. So in those concepts, that's a completely different kind of relationship. And those are more of just a very close, honestly, almost familial relationship, because you are asking very invasive questions and there's a level of trust that inherently is necessary for those questions to be answered. And it is important that both people be honest with each other, because you are counting on each other for direct feedback and for being that critical voice, but not too critical. And so finding that balance in all of these things is what I would say really sets apart the top level coaching experience, and finding that, because it's not always just about matter of growing. It's a matter of growing in a steady process so that you are helping them to be their best version of themselves in addition to how they're playing the game. And so everything we've mentioned usually goes into that kind of relationship. And then of course there's probably the most common interaction I have with top level players, where people just message me like half an hour before a tournament set and say, all right, this person's in my bracket, I want to beat him. And so
Oh,
I actually block people who do that to me. I want you to know that. I've absolutely blocked people who do that to me.
Classic.
Yep. Nope, that's not allowed. I don't let people do that to me at all.
I'll literally be cleaning dishes and then just type up like somebody a guide on how to beat like this niche character that nobody knows the matchup to, and just like type it with one hand, keep doing with what I'm doing with the other hand. Of clarification, so I actually didn't give Cola direct notes. I gave someone notes on. So that I literally typed up watching. I think it was Gluttony versus Goblin when Goblin went to Europe.
mm-hmm.
And I watched the VOD on 2x speed while I ate my lunch.
Yes.
a short essay and sent it to somebody, and then they passed that on to Cola. And I was like, well, this looks really familiar. And so I just asked, and they said, oh, yeah, I sent it to Cola. I was like, okay.
I love
So-
the 2 times VOD. My favorite.
Yeah. Big fan. So, and Glutony, of course, hit me up asking me if I had advice on how to close the things that were being exploited on him. And I know we've mentioned this before, but there's generally a few ways top players are going to approach you as an educator. And that is, they're either approaching everything that they think might have a chance, like even 1% chance of offering something, because at this point, any improvement is improvement. Because once you start getting to top level, there are a lot less hanging fruits, if any at all. And so every improvement you can find is hard to find. And the higher up you get, the better you get, the more skills you learn, the fewer skills there are that are particularly relevant. Because again, like I said before, there's always going to be more skills to learn, but not all skills are equally tested. And so finding the most tested skills are generally things that a lot of top players find. A lot of top players already have positioning in mind. They have these things. However, in my experience, I believe the way this was phrased by somebody was there's industrialized and creative smash. And so usually one of these approaches to the game lacks the other. And so if a top player only has one of these things, then teaching them the other is going to be a wonderful low-hanging fruit for them. And so that has been something that I've helped top players to get a quick boost and obviously get a relatively short-term performance improvement. Outside of that, it really just comes down to everybody's different. Everybody's situation is different. What they're looking for is different. What they're willing to invest into their situation is different at every level of play. And this is still true at top level. And for what I personally have offered, it's just a matter of I have something for everyone. And so that's a lot more important at top level when people feel like there's nothing left for them to find. And I always have something. So.
All right. Well, that was Coach's Corner for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed the content. If you guys like the content, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And we're going to be seeing you guys on the next episode. I hope you guys learned a lot. Class dismissed.